God, now that I'm discovering how beautiful you are and amazing you are, I just want my friends to know you. How do I do that? And God, use my life. I don't know how. When the guys had asked me to be in this band, I had said no at first because I was like, that's definitely not something I'm comfortable with. That's not something I'm capable to do. But in the book, you'll see there are experiences that confirmed it, said, I think I'm supposed to be doing this. And but the heart still was that I can grab this mic and tell my community, my friends, my neighborhood, how Jesus has changed my life. Once we realized that we weren't really welcomed into that Christian side of things, then it was just confirmation that we'll just keep doing what we're doing then, and we'll just keep playing for our friends, and we'll keep playing for whatever place in San Diego will allow us to. In the mainstream, then there were people trying to classify us as a Christian band, but they weren't doing that in a good way. They were doing that in a way to say, hey, okay, I know P.O.D.'s popular. I know they're on MTV.
You're still second rate. You're still second rate.
Exactly. Yeah. Because you got to understand, we came from the street. So it was like when we gave our life to Jesus, it was like we knew that the people would be offended. And it was like, or say, oh, you guys are weak for that. That's a crutch. That's and so it was like we had almost like a gang mentality. Like, well, dude, I'm ready to throw down right now for my Jesus. No one's going to tell me. Most of the people that we're in contact with, bro, they've been hurt. They've been hurt by Christianity. They've been hurt by the church. They've been hurt by pastors. What they don't realize is that's not God.
Right.
That these are just people. They're just human beings, just like us. That
Welcome to the Seacoast podcast, everybody, and we've got a very special episode. At one point in their career, a band called P.O.D. It's neat for me because I remember when they were just, kind of getting their name out there, being way big into the Christian music scene because I wasn't allowed to listen to secular music. So I was really in tune with all of the Christian artists. Well, he wrote a book called Son of Southtown, where he grew up, and it really is. I zipped through the book the day before doing this interview, and really is a cool story and narrative of his journey of literally, the point of the book is how he lived in both worlds and kept on the straight and narrow. I mean, because P.O.D. got so big that they weren't in the Christian industry, really. They were playing with the big bands in the big festivals and were pretty much accepted into the mainstream. I've got a couple of things I want to let you guys know. And first of all, if I sound a little more lethargic than I usually do, I just got over like a 24-hour bug, and so I am depleted energy-wise. But I wanted to give a shout-out to some patrons. These are staff members, most of them, if not all of them. And we got Josh Mitchum, Ashley Smith, Desiree Clement, Allie Himes, Jenna Surratt, Elizabeth Reppard. You two also. We'll introduce Brianna here in a second. Ryan Scott, Tim Lindsay, your dad, Alexandra Hunt, and Jenny Mayer. Thank you guys. And then one of our avid listeners, him and his wife, the Chapmans, Roy Chapman, he wrote me the other day and he said, just letting you know that the podcast with Martin Bennett was one of the best I've heard. What an interesting story. We'll start reading the book this week. And that's a book called Wounded Tiger, and I started reading it too. It's like a 600-page book. I'm about 400 pages in, and it is a miraculous story of a Jesus transformation in the heart of the dude who dropped the bombs in Pearl Harbor. It's a true story. Wow. And it also involves a storyline of some pacifist missionaries that were in Japan, and they had to get the heck out, and they retreated to the Philippines because it just got so dangerous for Americans to be living in Japan. But these missionaries were extremely loved the Japanese people. So it was a really weird situation for them. And then you have a guy who's a soldier who hates the Japanese and becomes a prisoner of war. And I have still yet to get to the part where all of their lives overlap. And so I can't wait to see how that happens. But thank you, Roy. And yeah, I agree. That was a fun conversation. So, want to introduce Brianna. Brianna. Oh, that's going to be, it's going to take me 2 months. Just
Took some time with mine too.
I know.
Yeah.
I'll make it so easy though. I tell everybody when I moved to Charleston, everybody was like, is it Anna or Anna? And then they would forget and they didn't want to be insulting. Not that it would ever be considered insulting to me, but I just started telling people to call me Bree. It's what my family calls me. And it just, you see the weight lifted off everybody. Like, okay, we can do that.
Do you
we
prefer
can
Bree?
That. I love Bree. Yeah, you can totally call me
Okay,
Bree.
because I do, I think it's called mnemonic devices with people's names. And we were just talking about Southern culture and you referred to Southern, and Anna sounds way more Southern than Anna. So I would get it. Yeah. So do you prefer Brianna or Bree?
You can call me Bree.
Either?
Yeah.
Bree. Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. So tell us what you do around here. I know, but I want our listeners to know.
Yeah, totally. So I am the site director of SEU Seacoast, which is the college here at Seacoast Church.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So that's what Kelly was doing?
That's what Kelly was doing.
Okay. And as a site director, what in a nutshell, what's your role? So this is a real university.
Yeah.
And SEU is kind of spread all over, and is what Seacoast is doing in partnership with SEU, is that a normal thing that other churches do too, or is this kind of a unique deal that we're doing?
We are actually one of over 200 churches that have said yes to being a campus for Southeastern University.
Wow.
Gotcha.
So it's really, really cool. Their vision is, who better to partner with if we want more SEUs across the country, if we want to expand and have campuses, who better to partner with than the local church? Mm-hmm. And so we are one of those churches of a lot of churches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So nutshell, what do you do?
I lead the way. Mm-hmm. I make the hard decisions. Sometimes I make the really fun decisions. Sometimes I get
You should just be called the dean.
Right, or the principal,
right.
Like that. It feels like I'm the principal a lot of times, but I get to cast vision for the school. I get to dream. I get to love and walk alongside of these college students in their journey. I'm also over the practicum experience, which is basically like an internship. So it's the hands-on learning experience. It's a huge part of this regional campus model for Southeastern University. So the day-to-day discipleship, programming, all the things.
Gotcha. So we were talking just a second ago on the patron feed about honesty and dishonesty. If you didn't like your job and I asked you right now, do you enjoy it? How would you handle it? Like if you were just miserable and you're like, I'll do anything else. And I say, hey, do you like it? I mean, would you be honest and then say, hey, maybe scrap that? How would you handle that if you hated your job?
We know she would lie either way. Satisfy people.
I would find a really great way. I would use very specific, particular language. But honestly, you would probably see the truth in my face.
Yeah.
Because my face always gives me away.
Yeah.
Like I can say the nicest things, but if I don't mean it, you can see it.
All right. So do you like it?
I love my job. I do. I have the best job on the planet, honestly.
Yeah. See, you can't fake that.
Yeah. No lies.
And that one would be kind of easy if you didn't. You'd be like, the thing I like about this job the most is it has challenged me. Like it has made me learn. Because that would be the truth. Yeah. And you don't have to add to it that I hate the challenge.
Yeah. It's great.
Awesome. How long have you been doing this?
This is school year 3, but I moved to Charleston 2 years ago for this position in September.
Really?
Yeah.
So you weren't on staff before this?
I was on staff before this. Yeah, I was on staff at our Seacoast Columbia campus as the worship leader.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So we are going to talk to Sonny Sandoval from P.O.D. But before that, we had an episode with Brian Zahn, and then some episodes before that, we've been talking a lot about war and governments and how invested we are into politics. And I just wanted to share this with you guys. So Eugene Peterson, he is I guess you would call it the writer of the message. It's still the Bible, so he didn't author it, but he authored this version. And basically it goes through the Gospels every day of the year. And so I started this kind of late, so I'm catching up to February. But I just thought how he articulated this. So he's talking about what Herod was trying to do and how uneasy Herod was of Jesus. And it's a super short devotion, but here is the prayer that he closes every devotion with a prayer. And I love how he writes this, and it really, I think, brings some spiritual meaning to how I feel about politics, because I feel pretty uninvested, and maybe to a fault. But he says, God, when I see how kings and nations slip into the shadows at Jesus' birth, I see that I will do well not to become engrossed in either of them. I will not be excavating Bethlehem or by analyzing Herod, but by worshiping you, that my life will find center and purpose. And I just thought that was so awesome. And it even, hopefully, those words would speak to people who are invested in politics and are called to be really invested in politics, that at the end of the day, that's not where our hope comes from.
Right.
I mean, we are a different people. We have been called out, and we should see better than that, the answer isn't in who we're voting for, and maybe it's super important who gets elected office to some people, and I would understand why, but that's not our hope. And it is tough, honestly, to see so many Christians not relish that, and take that to heart, that I don't have to get all bent out of shape about who's in office.
Yeah.
Do y'all, are any of y'all, I know T, are either of y'all super invested, and that's hard to wrap your mind around? Like you do lose some sleep over who's in office?
I don't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I was super invested over the last few years, probably in an unhealthy way, because I found that I was beginning to carry the tension. Like it was affecting how I felt in my heart. It was affecting my mind, and I found myself getting worked up and anxious. So I knew it was something that I had to let go of. And I think it was you, Pastor T, that said on that podcast that you were interested, or maybe Joey, maybe it was you, interested. It was one of you, interested but not invested. And I loved that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's how we should be. I think it's totally okay to be curious and interested, but the more we invest, I don't know that it's good for our hearts.
Well, and I remember something I call him T-bombs, because he'll sit there all quiet, and then he'll say something that's like, whoa, where'd that come from? But what T said, I said interested but not invested. But I think something T said, I take to heart also, and I think a lot of people would disagree, and that's fine, you can disagree, but T basically said, I'm invested in things that I can actually impact and control, and I don't really have, people be like, oh, you can by voting, but it's like, who South Carolina is going to vote for no matter what. We're a very Republican state. I mean, so it just doesn't seem like that's something that we really have a whole lot of real input and involvement. But we've been talking about that forever. I just wanted to share this. I got to know, have y'all ever heard of P.O.D? And we're going to talk music. P.O.D?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge, which means no.
Well, no. I mean, it just means that I'm 43 years old, and there's a whole bunch of crap in my mind that might have pushed that out. Give me a song.
Southtown. We're in the Southtown. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. And they also do that boom song. Here comes the boom. Here comes the boom.
Wait,
Ready or not.
Yes.
So that's P.O.D. You have heard of them. Were you ever into them?
I was, only because I have a brother who is 3 years older than me. And so when I was in middle school, he was in high school. And this was the time, I'm giving away my age here, that we were burning CDs for our friends, And so he brought home a copy of P.O.D.'s Satellite.
Yeah.
And we loved it because when we were younger, our parents did not allow us to listen to secular music either. So it was like, this is heavy and this is bad, and but it's Christian.
Yeah.
Youth of a Nation, Alive, and I think they were game changers.
Oh, you're going to love this episode then.
I can't wait. Yeah. I think they were game changers in the industry because it was like, I don't know, help me here. Would you say they're metal, Joey?
Yeah, so technically they would be called new metal. So
Okay.
new metal would be Korn, Limp Bizkit.
Yes.
There's another really big one that eludes me right now. But yeah, it's like a new metal.
Yeah.
Whereas old metal sounds more classic Iron Maiden, Slayer, and all that kind of
It
stuff.
was this metal music that was Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't really done around that time. And so also we were rebellious enough that we could like play it and say, Mom, you think this is secular, but this is Christian.
Yeah, well, there really was something about being the kid, and you were one too, where you couldn't listen to secular music. And, I carpooled with 2 other guys in high school, and so they're aware of that and what kind of music I'm playing in the car. And it really was something special when you had a band, and I had plenty of them because I dug deep into the indie scene and was aware of obscure bands and everything. So they were a dime a dozen for me. But a band like P.O.D., it was like, if you're into that kind of music, you hear them, and lyrically it doesn't matter. They are freaking killing it.
They are
and you can't you can't deny it.
Yes.
As far as whether or not you can listen to secular music or not. It's just like you're kind of proud of playing it.
And during that time, the fact that it was this Christian band that was accepted in both the mainstream secular world and the Christian world, and you would hear them on Christian radio and secular radio.
Yeah.
It was unique. It was different. They were ahead of their time.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
Yeah. Never heard of them, right?
Never heard of them.
It's all right.
Have you heard of Napster?
No.
LimeWire.
No.
This is so good.
Hey, you will get a kick out of this to me, Alex, and this will sound kind of racist that I'm asking you, the black guy. But
it's Black History Month, Joey.
That's right. Did you hear what Chris Rock said about Black History Month? He's just like, yeah, y'all gave us the shortest month and the coldest month.
I did.
Let me ask you this. I asked Sonny if it is acceptable for me to use the word the hood, and he laughed really hard and said, of course, man, I love my neighborhood. But so I think that I'm getting it confused with maybe the ghetto. Like Priscilla, my wife, and I'll throw under the bus, but she would say this openly too. She's an open book, but she had to break the habit of referring to something as, oh, that's so ghetto. In her mind, she's just meaning, looks ugly, looks like it hasn't been kept up with or something, but she realized, hey, ghetto is like a real place where real people live. Is the hood, is that just a nickname for neighborhood? I mean, I guess like I live in Carolina Bay. Mostly white people live in Carolina Bay. That's my hood. Like, is that what neighborhood means? I mean, is that what hood means, just short for neighborhood? Because I thought the hood, Boys in the Hood. That's, the movie Boys in the Hood. That's what I'm thinking when I hear hood. Like when a white guy says, oh, did you live in the hood?
Yeah, I'm thinking that's what it used to mean, but now it's more of what you're talking.
Wait, it used to mean what?
It used to mean more poor, slummy, poverty-stricken area. Yeah. But now it means more like Cedric the Entertainer. Have you seen the show Welcome to My Neighborhood or Welcome to the Hood?
Mm-mm.
When it's like him and his white neighbors and they're all in the suburbs. Like now the hood is just wherever you are. But ghetto is totally different.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is how Priscilla was using the word ghetto. That's not cool. Right.
I'm not going to bat an eye at it, but it could offend somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Would y'all be comfortable with saying the hood? Like, do you live in the hood?
Probably not.
I work and live in the hood, so I'm like, it is what it is. It's just the truth. I chose to do that, so.
Are any of y'all really big into music? Like, I would put music in the category for me as a hobby. Like, before it was readily available on iTunes and Spotify, like I was going on websites, reading about all these underground bands, and then I'd have to go somewhere to listen, and then I'd have to order them, mail order. And then before the internet, like I would literally get record labels, I'd get on their mailing list, and they would send out what the new albums were. Tooth and Nail was huge back in the day. It was a, basically the real deal music that you can be proud of, and they're mostly Christian musicians. And I mean, I'll never forget, like, there were some labels that were so obscure that I would write a check, I'd put it in an envelope, send it in the mail, and hope that I got my CD, and hope they don't clear the check and forget to, that's how big, and I've always been really big into music. Would y'all be casual listeners or really big into it?
Oh, I love music.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a guy who would sit at home and, back in the day, used to call in and request songs.
Oh, yeah.
So I would call in and request the same song and then take my tape that, we'd already used, put the little piece of paper in there so that we could record over it.
Yeah.
And then record the songs to make my love tapes.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I've loved music.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you,
I
Brianna?
love music.
I just called you Brianna.
It's
Bree.
okay. And it's okay. Yeah.
Bree.
I love music.
Yeah.
So much.
What do you gravitate towards now? Like when it comes to music, what do you find yourself usually listening to?
I am open to almost anything, but I think especially now coming out of 21 Days of Prayer, where we spent a lot of time intentionally in God's Word and in fellowship with Him, like I'm finding that I'm still sitting with the music that I was in January. Yeah. Worship.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you? Casual listener? You love
music.
it?
Yeah. No, I love it. Yeah, I think especially being in church, you automatically become friends with a lot of musicians and people that have a passion for music. So that's been, I think growing up I was a casual listener, but becoming an adult I've become a lot more passionate about it.
I've heard some interesting theories that we typically, what we listen to in high school will usually be what carries you into, for the rest of your life. I mean, that's why when I remember playing for my grandma, like I went through a season, I still like it, but I don't listen to it a lot, but I went through a season where I was listening to old-timey 40s music, and I mean, my grandma was just like, I haven't heard these songs in decades, and like tears coming down her eyes, like, and so I was into indie music, weird stuff, straightforward rock, hip hop, and those are the sort of stuff that I revert back to and still listen to nowadays. And it is interesting because we did an interview with Michael Sweet from Stryper. When I was in elementary school, I was listening to Stryper, which is a heavy metal, like Poison, Bon Jovi, and all that, where I don't go back to that music, which makes sense if this theory is true. I go back to what I listened to in high school because when Nirvana came out with Nevermind, all those bands, they just seemed to disappear. Poison, Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, all those guys, and it was the new thing, like this raw, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and I was listening to the Christian versions of those, but that's kind of what I revert back to. But
I don't think
you're shaking your head now.
Dude, I listen to Tupac and NWA, and I'm a pastor. So I am not reverting back to that.
Yeah, but stylistically, if you're rocking to some Christian stuff, and there is nowadays some really good rap by Christians.
Say, you listen to Christian rap?
I do listen to Christian rap, but it ain't. Nah, I ain't giving. And I love Pac. I can't give him credit for that because although he told an amazing story and everything that he said, no. I don't think that.
But can you listen to? So obviously you don't. But when I think of Tupac, so I will listen to Tupac sometimes, and I can't listen to the songs that are just inundated with womanizing because it's just I don't enjoy it. It turns me off. But I can listen to Tupac, and no offense to Tupac, he was brilliant. He was a poet, but he was also a dumb young kid, just like I was when I was his age. I mean, he died, I think, at 25. So I can listen to him as he's figuring life out. He was raised in the hood. He is living a gang life, for better or for worse. We would all say for worse because that's not a good lifestyle. But I can listen to it in context. You can't really. No, you don't vibe with that.
I can get that. Like there's certain songs that I can listen to and I'll be like, I resonate with, like Dear Mama,
I was
Yeah.
literally thinking that.
Or Changes.
Dear Mama.
or
was probably-
Changes, or Only God Can Judge Me.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but Hit 'Em Up.
Yeah.
He also wrote Hit 'Em Up. If you're listening, don't go Google that. Do not Google. Now everybody's gonna go and Google it, but I'm warning you, don't do it.
Yeah.
Definitely don't do it around any kids.
Yeah. So you were listening to P.O.D. because of your brother. What were you gravitating towards in high school? I'm curious.
So
and are
in high
you and I
school-
around the similar age? I will tell you my age, and you can tell me whether or not we're in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
I'm 47. Are we in the same
No.
ballpark? Okay.
No.
You're a lot younger, I
Yeah,
would
I'm
assume.
36.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I would assume.
You
So,
baby.
Answer, Joey.
oh, for sure.
See, look, he took
This whole
notes.
You know
this
what?
whole
Thank you.
time, she out here talking about don't be asking my age, and she ain't even 40.
Yeah.
Thank
You know what
yeah.
we were doing at 36?
Yeah. Yeah, she's a baby. Don't even ask her
Guys,
what her
I
age
received
is.
that. I
Right?
received
I
that
just
in the
had a
name of
birthday.
Jesus.
I got old. Don't
You got
worry.
old. What does that mean? 21? You can drink now? That's
Dang, I've been legal.
how old did you turn?
26.
26. Is that like a milestone? Like you said, that's like I was thinking. There's no way you're 30.
No, but
it's-
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm also getting old.
yeah, yeah.
When I turned 25, I literally was like, I'm 30. So that was
Yeah.
my mindset.
Oh, it's the weirdest thing that my brother is turning 50. I mean, because I'm just 2 years behind him, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. Like I did not realize it was going to happen this fast. All right, what kind of music do you listen? So you're 10 years behind me.
Right.
So when you were in high school, we're talking early 2000 to 2005.
2003, 4 to 2. I graduated in 2007. So,
Were you pop radio girl or?
well, the question is like, are you asking what I listened to when my parents weren't around, or what I
Ah.
listened
No,
to?
we want the real.
See, I was a rule follower. I was a rule
We
follower,
want
but I
the
will say
truth.
this: you'll get a kick out of this. So my brother, he was sneaking, and my mom for sure, and I guess she would be right, but I just don't have this huge stickler of Christian secular music, but. He was listening to Guns N' Roses' Sweet Child of Mine, and we listened to all that kind of stuff that was Christian. And my mom was like, is that Christian music that your brother's listening to? And I was like, nope. And he got in big trouble. And so for my mom, it was like Holy Spirit discernment. I picked right up on it because I got the Holy Spirit in me.
Are our moms the same person? It sounds exactly like
So
her.
I was a rule follower. You were not. So
Well,
what were
and
you listening
I
to?
just love music so much, and I love that there is music for every season that you're in, music for every mood that you're in, and so I follow the rules in almost every other area of my life but music, just
Yeah.
because even then, like that was when Usher was in his prime.
Yeah.
That was Ludacris. That was T-Pain, you know, and so like really good music happening on the secular side in the hip hop rap world, which those were the albums that I was listening to when my parents weren't around.
Hey, I found my wife to Usher. So
Let's go.
you know, dance for a while.
Hey, did you know
Let's
that
go.
you may not know this? There was a heavy band in the Christian market called Ludacris. And Ludacris, the hip hop, got so big, they were like, we got to change our name. So they changed their name to Norma Jean. But
Wow.
anyway.
What a shift.
Yeah. All right,
Wow.
let's hear it. What were you listening to?
Yeah, I was listening
Usher,
to that.
all the hip hop.
Oh, all the hip hop, all the rap. The first album that I ever had a friend burn for me and snuck behind my parents' back was Nelly's Country Grammar album.
Classic.
Classic. So I think that probably opened the door for everything else. But I was also into, that's when Gavin DeGraw came onto
Yeah.
the scene for the first time. That was when John Mayer was making the best music of his life was during that time. Maroon 5's Songs About Jane, the only album that I ever credit of theirs that's any good. It was their very first album. That music was happening. And Grey's Anatomy was huge when I was in high school. So they were well known for introducing everybody to new songs, new artists who were very
I believe
underground
it.
indie. And so we were so into those songs. So yeah. But also Christian was great then too. Christian was epic. Worship was epic then.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to talk about worship music a little bit. And as usual, we're not going to get to everything we had planned because this has been so good. But I find myself like when it comes to corporate worship, so it really, I mean, obviously, everybody has their particular styles and favorite songs that they can probably get a little more quickly enveloped in a worship service and stuff. But bottom line, it's just a different animal for me when I'm worshiping with brothers and sisters and we're singing songs about our mutual belief and hope in Jesus. It kind of just doesn't matter, you know. Now, it used to, and I used to, you know, maybe even be judgmental on, you know, maybe all the lights and, you know, just kind of, you know, being a spectator skeptic, you know, but I've grown out of that and I just recognize the depth of what we're doing. But in my own personal time, I will gravitate towards either Black person worship, like the urban gospel, Kirk Franklin, that kind of stuff really connects with my heart, or like indie artists that are playing traditional hymns, like and just really subdued, laid back. And I may, you know, I've thought about this. I was like, man, maybe I'm missing out on something. But my worship and prayer time rarely involves music. So when it does, when I'm like, man, I really need to put some stuff to fill my heart, it's gonna be urban gospel or like traditional old school hymns. Like, do you guys use music as a part of your personal worship? Like, am I missing out on doing
You're
that
missing
regularly?
out.
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all music is worship, whether it be
Preach.
like gospel, secular, it is. Worship is glorifying whatever. So just like we were talking about Tupac, we're listening to it, we're glorifying the situation. But there is nothing better than sitting in a quiet room with a worship song, crying out to God by yourself or with others, but try it by yourself and wait and see if he responds.
Yeah.
And oftentimes he does. Like, you can just let it go and your hair start tingling, the tears will start running. You won't be able to understand, but it could be something that you've been praying for weeks ago, and it seems like you'll get an answer. Or it might be something that's troubling your heart in lifetime, and it's big for me.
Yeah.
I don't know
Now, I'm
why
gonna
I
take that
can't
to heart,
explain
man.
it, but
A memory that just popped into my mind was when Pastor T took our staff on a trip to Honduras a year ago now, actually.
yeah.
And I don't remember, I'm sure our staff, I don't know, went through stuff, but I remember sitting next to him on the plane. We had the island between us, and he had on headphones. And Pastor T literally worshiped the entire way from, I don't know if that was the flight to Miami or the flight from Miami to Honduras, but was just listening. I think it was Gyra by Maverick. He was just listening and worshiping. I mean, not like obnoxiously, but kind of to himself. And I remember us getting off the plane and you were saying how you had been praying for a few specific things, but just the like testimony of, yeah, worship can carry you through. I mean, that was an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour flight where you were just praying constantly for something through worship. So it does hold power in a quiet space by yourself or amongst people.
Is that part of your regular practice?
Yes and no. This year I usually listen to worship in my car, like when I'm driving somewhere. I like to read my word or pray with no music. I get really distracted. So I feel like if there was too much going on, I wouldn't be able to focus. This year I've kind of the Lord's asked me to actually drive in silence so that I would pray more. Again, because I usually get distracted and can't do multiple things at once. So if I'm listening to music, I'm not praying. This morning I could actually tell that I was praying, but really I was feeding into anxious thoughts. So the Lord asked me to put on worship. So it's a bit of both. But I love worship. Yeah, I have it on at work in my office pretty much all day. So I think it creates an atmosphere. I think it invites the Holy Spirit in without us actually having to do much. So again, if I'm like passively working and answering emails, I love being able to invite the Holy Spirit in without actively having to like worship myself.
Yeah. I'll tell you a true story. So Lee Worley, him and I were texting back and forth about music, and I sent him a song that I really like by The National, which is I guess you would call them a mainstream, not a Christian band. And he texted back. He said, "Yeah, real good song." And I did not take this the wrong way. Lovely. He said, "I hate to be that guy, but should you really be listening to music like this that's so freaking sad? Because it's a really sad song." And I think people know my background with struggles with depression and all that, but it's like I don't listen to sad music in a way where, and I could be kidding myself, and some people would be like, "Yeah, you're deceiving yourself." But for me, there's a place for sad music because it acknowledges all the emotions that a human can experience. And so I want to be true to times when I'm sad. Like, I don't want to deny it.
Yeah.
And I just don't feel like, now there will be times, and for me, I would say, I like this. I feel like it's good for me. There will be times if I'm in down and about and I'll want to listen to sad music, and that may not be the best thing, but I definitely don't feel like I get swallowed up into more sadness. It's almost just like an acknowledgement.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I think there's
I
like,
appreciated the pushback, you know?
because I get that way too. And I think even just going on, again, music is kind of a hobby. So I like exploring and finding new artists. But nowadays there's so many worship artists that do such a good job of being honest and real about feelings that we have as humans, but yet still glorifying God through them and finding the Holy Spirit in what we're going through and what we're feeling. So I've found myself more like leaning towards artists like Stephanie Gretzinger, or there's an artist called Gracie Binion that are very real and honest without it being a secular, we're just, feeding into heartbreak, feeding into pain, without there being hope and a light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, I think there's both, and that's helpful.
How about you? Is music a part of your practice?
It is.
Yeah.
It so much is. In fact, like, I wouldn't consider myself an emotional person in any other aspect of my life but music, especially worship.
Yeah.
And just how the Lord meets us there. And I think you mentioned the songs that are sometimes sad. That hasn't always been normal in the worship world. It's positive and praise and the vertical worship and all of that stuff is necessary and it's good. But I think what we're getting now are artists who are writing songs that acknowledge the lamenting,
Hardship,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, like Rita Springer put out an album last year, I think it was last year, called Fed by Ravens. And it is an entire album of her lamenting to the Lord that she wrote in a super difficult, painful, sad season of her life, where she's asking God the hard questions and she's saying, this is where I am. And he met her there. And it's really, really beautiful, which gives me so much hope for the future of worship music and worship in the church. But
I mean, you and I grew up in I think you did too, even though we're 10 years apart, where you couldn't even write a sad song and get it out there unless it ended on a happy note where God fixed everything. Like I was in a band in college and we were all Christians, and there was one band member that was very uncomfortable with the fact that we wrote a song and it didn't end on a happy note. And it's like, well, sometimes things don't end on a happy note. We always have hope, but yeah. So is it a part of your personal practice too? Like a part of your devotions and that sort of thing? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sounds like I'm missing out.
Worship leader.
Yeah. Well, we'll just dip our toes in this because we're running out of time. But have y'all ever thought of the difference between a song being anointed, like, oh, wow, that feels anointing, and then a song just being able to pull some things in our emotions? I've gotten to the place where I don't know what the difference is, and I don't really care. God is so encapsulating to me. Like, God is omniscient. God is omnipresent. So it all comes from God.
Yes.
So if there's a song playing, if we're being led by worship on a Sunday morning at the Mount Pleasant campus, and I start crying, who cares? Like, why would I start thinking, is this just my emotions because my heart's connecting, in a deeper way emotionally, or is this the Holy Spirit? Well, the Holy Spirit lives inside of me.
Right.
So, I almost don't even care about thinking through that. But I think part of that is acknowledging that I think sometimes we could maybe say a song is anointed when it's just like, to another person, they're like, I didn't feel that way at all. And it may be that we're connected to songs differently from a stylistic standpoint. We gravitate towards certain lyrics. Like there's some lyrics, it takes effort for me to worship. Like there's some songs where I'm like, seems like we're singing about ourselves and our love for God. I want to sing to God, and I have to kind of like, that's not the point here. But do y'all ever think about that? The difference between emotions and anointing?
A song can't be anointed. I can sing a song and it's not going to do anything for anybody. And Natasha can sing that same song and everyone cries. Because Natasha has an anointing on her life.
Every time.
And has been given the gift to sing. Same with you. So you can go on and scrap the whole song being anointing. Now, that song could be meeting me where I am because I'm struggling with whatever it is. And I am crying out to God right now. And I am praying that he comes through just like this song is saying. So this song can have meaning, but the song don't have no anointing.
Yeah.
See, my pushback would be a song like It Is Well With My Soul, like how that song was written, like it was written in grief in a real person who had lost his family. There seems to be something magical about that song. Like and I'm thinking,
Sing it for us.
What?
Sing it for us.
I'm not going to sing right
Why
now.
not?
It is well with my soul. There you go.
He's just staring at you.
Oh, point taken. No, I also didn't give any. I also didn't put any heart in it. So I could have probably tried. But no, that makes sense. Like if somebody tries to sing that song and they're not even on key, and you're like, oh, what was that?
Right, but if I'm going through something, if my mom just passed away and I'm listening to the words and I'm soaking that in, I'm bawling.
Yeah.
Because it's
Let's see if I can make you bawl. It is well.
He's just gonna side at you.
Nah, player. That ain't happening.
All right, Sonny Sandoval from P.O.D. Well, I wanted to let you know that I just zipped through this book yesterday, and it was delight. I really appreciate you forwarding me that book, and I wanted to let you know that Brian Welch he was one of our first guests on this show, so your buddy, and then one of your forefathers, Michael Sweet, has been on here as well. So
I don't know if he'd appreciate that.
Hey, and I did want to just say up top, it sounded like as I wrapped up the book that maybe, and am I saying her name right? Is it Nani or Noni? Noni?
Noni. Yeah,
Noni. It
Noni.
sounded like maybe she passed away as you were wrapping up the book very recently. I'm sorry, man.
Thank you, brother.
For our listenership, everything you're about to hear in this interview sounds like your Nani is greatly responsible for that sort of impactful woman in your life, eh?
Oh, 100%. I mean, all the ladies in my family, you know what I mean? We have strong women in our family.
Yeah.
And, her whole journey, and then, being an immigrant and coming to the States and, trying to build her life and raise us loving God. She was an angel walking this earth.
Yeah. So before we get into your story and your book, I got to ask you, so is U2 still your favorite band?
You know what? I just recently listened to the audio in Bono, and it took a few different road trips because it's 40 chapters.
Yeah.
But that's, as soon as I finished, even as I was listening to it, I was like, yep, this solidifies it. This is my favorite rock band. And he's amazing, so it was an incredible book. And so you could say yes, most definitely.
That's cool. Now, I got to know, as a fellow music fan, like, do you have in your mind your favorite heavy band? Like you're just like, I mean, just personally, when it comes to heavy music, this is my go-to. Do you have a band like that?
Well, see, I'm not like
because I know you like
I'm
tons
not.
of stuff.
Yes, I'm not like a metal
Right,
guy. You know
right.
what I mean? But if I say if I go to the gym or like I'm in an aggressive mood and I want to hear some, yeah, there's lots of hardcore bands, but some of the heavy music is just too straightforward driven. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Whereas I like so many different flavors. You know, so that's why I was, you know, I like bands like the Bad Brains. You know what I mean? I
Mhm.
like even though they were punk, they still had some reggae to them and a little bit of funk feel and stuff like that. You know, certain bands in that genre.
Yeah.
But I mean, I grew up yet, well, not grew up, but as soon as we started playing and Tooth and Nail came up, you know, I didn't know that there was a Christian scene, you know what I
Right.
mean? And so, or even Christian music, I didn't know anything was labeled like that. But then once, you know, there was my friends that I was playing with in these bands and they were signing to Tooth and Nail, then I started paying attention to kind of that
Yeah.
scene.
I'm going to say this, man, as somebody who is fresh off reading the book, and there seem to be people who God clearly calls out of the regular flow of people and for a special purpose. And there's two things that really stood out that seem to make you one of those people. One is, you know, for our listeners' sake, if you don't remember P.O.D., I mean, we're talking these guys reached the pinnacle of success. I mean, I'll name three bands that they never were as big as: U2, Madonna, Elton John. All right, so we're talking that high class. P.O.D. was
That's a
right.
tough one.
Yeah. So P.O.D. and y'all's heyday, man, y'all were right there, but below that top tier. And what I think is so special, that was never your plan. And I even love recalling when you pretty much said that your buddies who were starting a band, they asked you to be the front guy. More out of, well, we can't leave Sonny out, and he seems to be going through a time. We want him to be a part of this, and you weren't even sure if that was something that you wanted to do. So that's one, is just that was not, you weren't looking for stardom, and that what you were more of a behind the scenes guy. And then the second one is the situation with your mom, which I want to read a passage in your book. And I'm going to be quiet here for a second and let you do most of the talking, but I got to read this, man. So in page 62, man, just how you wrote this. So you, for our listeners' sake, you had just realized, okay, my mom's gonna pass away, and you wrote, sitting in your car, stunned, heartbroken, pissed off, I started talking with God. I don't know what I'll do if my mom dies. God, I don't know what I'm going to do without her, but I don't want her suffering like this, so I'll make a deal with you. I don't want all that religion. I hate that stuff. I don't want the blue-eyed, blonde-haired Jesus. I don't want the convert or else God of the Crusades or any of the TV holy water flopping on the ground preachers. I want my mom's Jesus. If that's who you are, if you truly are my mom's Jesus, then I'll follow you, because that's the only way I'm going to make it through this. And I think that's the only way she's going to let go. So you were in the book, you're telling people that you think she's holding on where she needs to slip away into peace, but she's waiting for you to kind of get some things right. You rededicate your life to Christ, and then you wrote, I went to the hospital and got cleaned up. When I got back to the hospital, I walked up to the side of the bed and I whispered in my mom's ear, go and be with Jesus. Your girls and I are going to be all right. And thus, there you have P.O.D. and what you stayed true to all these years. It seems like that was the anchor. I mean, I don't know, man. It's just, it's beautiful to read it all and just see God's plan. But man, congrats on the book. When is it going to be coming out to the public?
February 25th release date.
Yeah.
And I'll be doing some promo in between and, you know, just some fun stuff before I take off to Europe with P.O.D.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really highlights how you have truly lived in two different worlds. And I was thinking about how to articulate this, and I want you to articulate how you would toy with the word secular and Christian. But when I think of how you truly lived in two different worlds, I think that you were and are deeply connected to people inside and outside faith circles. Would you say that's pretty accurate? You're deeply connected to people inside and outside of faith.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
As I believe we should be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then, so unpack. We've had, we've talked to other artists on this podcast about this whole Christian and secular thing, and I know you've got some opinions on that when it comes to P.O.D. But the big question has always been, hey, are you guys Christians that play music, or are you a Christian band? A Christian artist?
Right.
How do you frame that up for P.O.D. through the years?
You gotta, I mean, 100%, just so that we're clear. I love Jesus. I have an intimate relationship with the creator of the heavens and the earth. And I love God. And everything that you read was a real experience. So I don't have a lot of the church. Well, I have my own church and institution of Christianity hangups, but I've let God take that away from me. But there are a lot of people, even in the industry now, that are, and friends and fans that I meet all over the world, that have grew up in the church, and they're bitter. And it's because they don't have a personal relationship with God. It was all just rules, regulations, do this, do that, and this is God right here, and He's in this box, you know. And so I had a real experience with God, and when I gave my life to Jesus, it was real. Now that doesn't make me better than anybody. It doesn't make me perfect. I don't have anything figured out. 30 something years later, I'm still walking with God, learning every single day. But what I did believe was that when I gave my life to God, that was a good thing. And I thought that people would be proud of me, or happy for me that I made this decision in my life, especially those who call themselves believers and Christians. And so, it it wasn't until I started to hang around Christians that I realized, it's unfortunate that we do have so many differences. It's unfortunate that you're putting this God who's blowing my mind away now that I'm reading His Word and having fellowship with them, that you guys are putting him in this box. And so, like you said, I never wanted to be in a band. I don't even think I don't consider myself a singer. I don't. I've just kind of learned as I've been going, and that was. But my heart was to say that. Let me plug this in.
Yeah.
My heart was just saying, God, now that I'm discovering how beautiful you are and amazing you are, I just want my friends to know you. How do I do that? And that was just a prayer, and it was saying, God, use my life. I don't know how. I work 40 to 50 hours a week. You know what I mean? I'm just an average guy. Use my life. And so when the guys had asked me to be in this band, I had said no at first, because I was like, that's definitely not something I'm comfortable with. That's not something I'm capable to do. But in the book, you'll see there are experiences that confirmed it, said, I think I'm supposed to be doing this. And but the heart still was that I can grab this mic and tell my community, my friends, my neighborhood, how Jesus has changed my life. Why can't I do that? And so that was the intent. That was the heart. It wasn't until we started playing, and we were playing house parties and wherever they would let us. We weren't even of age yet, and but the first time we got asked to play a Christian event, was when it was confirmed to me that this is not our calling, because they shut it down immediately. They just heard we were popular. We were playing. We're local, playing around town. Two of the guys had gone to their church, growing up, and so we played. And as you read, they stopped us halfway into the song, and because their heart was, this is not of God. And your tattoos are not of God, and your friends are not of God. And so that was like, this is weird to me. We're being received in all of San Diego. We're playing these Battle of the Bands, and we're catching there's a buzz going on about my band, and we're very open about our Christianity. So much back then that I felt like we became militant, which I had to learn not to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And once we realized that we weren't really welcomed into that Christian side of things, then it was just confirmation that we'll just keep doing what we're doing then, and we'll just keep playing for our friends, and we'll keep playing for whatever place in San Diego will allow us to. And as we went through, we learned how to transition and not be so militant and so in your face, and love people rather than want to fight for what we believe in, you know?
Right.
And so that's something that we've learned.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, just to give people a reference point. I mean, there's stories about, and I mean, you're giving your story. I mean, being about to go on to the Letterman show. I mean, being at SNL and hosting SNL as your band, and like, you know, that was during the Will Ferrell era. I love the story about, if I'm not mistaken, were you guys at some voice lessons where Katy Perry walked out having just got voice lessons? But anyway, she knew you guys were the Christian guys and wanted y'all to see her Jesus tattoo. I mean, seriously, one of, and I was thinking about this, like maybe I think crossover bands is, you know, for our listeners' sake, that's deemed as kind of the term as a Christian musicians that make it in the mainstream music world. And I don't even know if you would consider P.O.D. a crossover band, but I would say DC Talk was another big one that did that, Jars of Clay. When it comes to heavy music, I don't know if there was any one that I can think of bigger than P.O.D. where people knew you guys were Christians and it just didn't matter. It was just like, well, P.O.D. Have you heard them? Have you heard that album?
Yeah.
Like, is there a band I'm missing?
No. But see, even in those circles, as much as we love those bands, and I know them, you know, I know a lot of them personally, they were still behind the church walls. It didn't matter how big they were; they could have did arenas. It was all Christians. It was all youth group, and I don't say that in any disrespect whatsoever. But we didn't want to do that. If our music, so when we would play with all these secular bands, or we would play local shows, because we were so open about our faith, we knew that, hey, we have to be 20 times better than the bands we're playing with, because they're already going to judge us and say, yeah, but that's a Christian band.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they're like these guys. They're like these guys. Don't listen to them, kind of thing. You know, it's not the real deal. So all we can do is try to be as excellent as we possibly can, play the best that we can, and compete with everybody that hit the stage with us, so that then when they're like, I don't really know God, but I really love your band, man. And then it opens up a door for them to say, I still know people that are like, dude, I don't know God at all, but I freaking love P.O.D.
Yeah.
I love that band. You know what I mean? And so that's all I ever wanted, was just that soft place, you know what I mean? To land, so that God could say, see, these guys are my own. And you do have freedom, you know what I mean? And I do have style, and I can rock with the best of them. I am the best of them, you know what I mean? So we always had that edge to us. But like you said before, in going into it, once we got into the music system in the mainstream, then there were people trying to classify us as a Christian band, but they weren't doing that in a good way. They were doing that in a way to say, hey, okay, I know P.O.D.'s popular. I know they're on MTV.
You're still second rate. You're still second rate.
Exactly. And they're trying to put us in a category. So whenever, even today, 33 years later, I'll do an interview and they'll say, so are you a Christian rock band? And it's like, what? And so when I would get asked that by Rolling Stone magazine or whoever, I'd say, what do you mean by that?
Right.
And if you can define Christianity, please we can have a discussion. I am an open book about my faith. But also, if this is a rock magazine, you want to talk rock and roll, let's talk rock and roll. But I came to a point where I realized that 99.9% of the time, they weren't trying to highlight my faith or highlight the goodness of God or my story. They weren't trying to highlight that. They were trying to, subliminally tell their fans, this is a Christian band and you shouldn't take them serious. But once we sold 1 million records, once we sold 5 million records, we sold 10, then they can't deny it. And it's like, how do we get them? How do we get them another way? Obviously it's, and at that point, it wasn't Christians who were buying our record. It were those that were like-minded that said, no, I've been following P.O.D. since 92. I love these guys. I believe in their heart. But there was still those, the majority of believers that were like, it's not really, either it's not my style or I just think they're wolves in sheep clothing,
Yeah.
We've gotten it all.
Yeah. That was so cool. That was what was cool about that scene back then too, is you did have Christians and non-Christians both in the same scene, neither of them really caring whether or not the bands were Christian or not, as long as their hearts were kind of in a positive posture. It's just like, hey man, this is putting some good into the world. I'm all about it, man. Jesus, that's fine. May not be something I believe in, but that's fine with me. They're trying to love people, and it's like, it was like a cultural unity, man. It really was.
It is. And it's a scene, because in that hardcore scene, it was like everybody was about something, and you had the platform to be that. So, for us saying, hey, we love Jesus, that wasn't shocking to the hardcore world, because they were saying, well, I'm straight edge and I'm vegan and I'm a Buddhist, I'm Krishna. And so we gave each other the freedom and the space to say what they want. Just go up and say it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until we got into kind of the rock and the mainstream that said, hey, well, wait a minute, this isn't really a scene. This is an industry. You know what I mean? And this is sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So you guys really don't fit in there, but the moment, like I said, we sold records, then it wasn't about that anymore. It was like, oh, we can make money off these guys.
Yeah.
And so instantly the industry starts coming to us and saying, well, tell us some more about other bands that you know about. And that's when they discovered the Skillets of the world. You know what I mean? They signed Project 86. We got Blindside signed. They start looking at other bands that came from Tooth and Nail and came from that world, but it wasn't like they were trying to support their message. They were just saying, there's a market for this. There's a world for this.
Mm-hmm.
But, we've always been not really marketable, because we're so culturally mixed, and where we come from and how we look. And also we're so upfront with what we say. So I believe that, and kind of in my mind, I believe that I don't even know if we were ever really meant for the mainstream, but there was that season and that pocket in time that I do believe God said, I'm going to put you there so that you guys could tell the world that you love me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want people, I think your words, in this book and the stories you recount just speaks volumes. So I want people to feel this sort of mixture of your commitment to God and what God is going to do, and adding your absolute resoluteness. And I'm not a religious person. Religion will not have a play in what I do. And listen to the fruit of this. So this is an email you got from a Brazilian guy. He says, I don't believe in God, but I've always loved P.O.D. I was at the show when you fell off the barricade. I watched when you were trying to get back up. All those people were hugging you and you were hugging them. I think you were praying for them and they were praying for you. If that's God and his spirit, I want that. I need that. That was at a P.O.D. concert, man, which did not feel like church. I can guarantee you people, it did not feel like a church concert. It didn't look like a church setting, and someone experienced the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
I mean, how insane is that?
Yeah, but the cool part about it is that I was in a transition where I was basically asking God, or telling God, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this. And now here we were in South America, and I was praying, saying, God, if this is not of you, then I don't want to do this, because I feel like, and I write this, that God, I don't want to waste your time, God. And if I'm being honest, I don't want to waste my family's time either. And so I knew that at that point, this is a Portuguese speaking audience. I knew that I couldn't go up there and do the song and dance that most, religious leaders do, and religious bands and stuff do. They get up and they say what you want to see. But at the end of the day, they're just selling who they are. They're selling their music.
Yeah.
And so I knew that I couldn't get up there. And so I was saying, God, please do some. Holy Spirit, move on these people so that it's you.
Yeah.
And so I said to myself that night, first of all, I can't say anything because I don't speak the language. I'm just going to play the music. I'm going to play the music that I believe that has been given to us by God. And so we played it. And that's the night that happened. And that's when I stumbled back on stage, from after falling off. And I was just like, thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
Because see, before in P.O.D., because of the pressure of, Christians or no, this is a ministry, not a band, and this pressure to preach the gospel or to be whoever they thought we were supposed to be, a lot of the times, or most of the times, it was always forced and it was contrived. Because if I have a microphone in my hand or a platform, we as Christians believe that that's the only way God will save. If I say something from my mouth right now, they're not thinking about the long plan of living your life, loving God and loving people and being kind and empathetic and being the person of Jesus.
Yeah.
But they think that's in a moment.
Right.
And so that's why it's like, well, you guys don't say Jesus enough in your music, or you don't give altar calls at, you're. It's like, dude, actually, we did that in the beginning, and that wasn't the way to go.
Right.
We were more bitter in people's mouths than anything. But some Christians will say, well, that's just because they can't handle the truth, and that's you guys are no compromise, and you guys are giving it to them direct, And
Right.
it's like, nah,
Well,
we're being invited into their house. We want to be invited back.
I love that, and I love how you put that in the book. And as a guy who went to all these shows,
Mhm.
it clicked with me. Like you basically said how, and these are my words, but basically trying to articulate what you said. But you basically said something to the point of you were invited there to play a certain kind of music that you're basically saying we play. Hey, we play this kind of music. You invited
Yeah,
me in. They didn't invite you in for a sermon. They just
yeah,
didn't.
yeah.
That's not what they were asking for. Now,
No, sir.
you could almost see it as, and I don't think you use this word, but almost like rude. Hey, we asked you guys to come play music.
Yes.
Now, and that's not to say that everybody who does altar calls unannounced
No.
are rude people,
No.
but I think when you flip it around, and I got to read, man, I don't know if you remember the guy who sent this, but you said a Christian dude sent you a letter, and it was the best advice you had ever gotten. And he said, I've been following you guys. I'm excited for you, and I love your zeal. Good so far, you say. But then he continued, if I could give you just one piece of advice, you're gaining in popularity, and you're playing places that I could never play. They're places that
Hmm.
most guys who are vocal about their faith never get into. And then
Yeah.
he admonished you and said, don't forget to lead in love. Remember, you are guests in the world's house, and you want them to invite you back. Leave
Yeah.
the self-defense behind and lead in love. How have you done that your whole career? Have you done a pretty good job? Would you give yourself a
Oh,
B plus?
hey, man, I hope so, man. But it was that. But you can
That's
tell
some
what
great
he was
advice,
saying.
man. That's some
Yeah.
great advice. Gosh.
Because you got to understand, we came from the street. So it was like when we gave our life to Jesus, it was like we knew that the people would be offended, and it was like, or say, oh, you guys are weak for that. That's a crutch. That's a, and so it was like we had almost like a gang mentality, like, well, dude, I'm ready to throw down right now for my Jesus. No one's going to tell me.
Yeah.
And so when we would play shows, we would go with that mentality, like, I'm ready to go. No one's
Mm-hmm.
going to tell me about that my God is this or my God's that. And that's not the way, man. And so when he wrote that, and back then, I don't even think it was emails yet. I think it was a
Right.
personal letter. And he was just saying, man, I love what you guys are doing. And I get it. And that comes from an experienced, mature believer where he's saying, I get it. I get where your hearts are at. But remember this, lead in love. And so, we learn every record, man. We learn every tour. We learn every year that we keep moving is like, we're trying to lead in love because the people that most of the people that we're in contact with, bro, they've been hurt. They've been hurt by Christianity. They've been hurt by the church. They've been hurt by pastors. What they don't realize is that's not God.
Right.
That these are just people. They're just human beings, just like us. That but sometimes as believers, we try to act like we got it all figured out, and we're telling the world how to be when we're not applying them to our own lives.
Yep.
And it's that same mentality. You're just defending the cause. You're defending our God. And it's like, we don't have to defend our God. Our God he is almighty.
Yeah,
He's
he's got it.
powerful.
He's
He
got it.
defends us. Yeah. He don't need us, pal.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, let me ask you a quick politically correct question. Get your opinion. Is it okay for me as a white guy to refer? Could I ask you, hey, you're from the hood? Is that okay for me to use the word hood? I'm serious. Like, I'm a little uncomfortable. Can I use?
100%.
Okay.
I'm proud. Hey, I'm proud of my neighborhood, man.
Yeah,
It's just
yeah.
short for neighborhood. That's all.
Okay. So I want people to realize you found a lot of financial blessing with your craft, but you were from the hood. You were from a very, very low socioeconomic background, right? Like, when you look back on Sonny in his 20s, you know, I know for me as a 47-year-old, I look back at Joey in his 20s, God bless him, but my gosh, you know, just I probably feel this. Yeah, I'll feel the same way about 47-year-old Joey when I'm 67 too. But I just look back on that young version. When you look back on that young version, man, you were given a huge challenge. You became famous. You became a rock star. You know, people say, "Oh, what a rock star!" You were a rock star. Like looking back, how'd you do? You know, how'd you do in those early days? Because you know, you made your mom a commitment. You made a commitment, most importantly, to God, and you were serious about that. How'd you do in those early years?
You know, man, that's the reason why you know a lot of this. Writing the book, I didn't write this book to be a how to do Christianity. You know what I mean? Here are the 5 steps to loving God, because I don't have that figured out. But I am in love with God. You know, I believe His word. I believe that He saved me. And when I got in this band, it was almost like I was saying, I really don't know everything right now, but I just know that God saved me and it was real, and He can do the same for you. And as we got through, you know, this is the challenges of life. I mean, there are challenges even in the 4 walls of your own church, you know what I mean? But I don't have the luxury to do that. We were in the real world. And so everything is an experience, you know what I mean? And then, you know, just to fast forward through it all, mistakes and all, successes, glories, you know, good choices, bad choices. I still got to a point where I realized that in my mind, I thought, no, I still love God. That hasn't changed. I'm still sharing my faith with people. I'm still doing good things. I'm still loving people. But then I got to a point where I realized that I was so jaded by not only just rock and roll and music, but I was jaded by the institution of church and Christianity, you know? And so I finally got to a place where I realized that I was lukewarm. I didn't plan to be that, because in my heart, I still love God. That's never changed.
Mm-hmm.
If you would anybody was to ask me about Jesus, I'm going to share Jesus with them. I'm going to love anybody. I'm going to be helpful, kind. That's not going to change. But my experience, you know, and being in the presence of God everything had just changed. I was just so jaded, and that's when I had made a decision to just put it down for a minute and say, God, you know, if this is not of you anymore, then I'm okay with. I'll get a 9 to 5 tomorrow working locally. At least I know I could be home with my family. You know, I don't want to do this for rock and roll's sake. God, you know that's not my heart. But I also could admit and realize and ask that, yeah, it's hard to live in the world, even when you know Jesus. It's hard, and I was tired of being judged for maybe not doing it up to the standard that people thought I was as a Christian. We were just living our lives. Nothing bad. I can't say that. I definitely am not living the rock and roll
Right.
story. You know what I mean? But
I
that's
mean,
just because,
you were taking your son Justice on tours
yeah,
and being an example of
yeah,
what a good father looks like. That's how you were
yeah.
rolling. Yeah.
But that's just what my book talks about. It's like, even though I'm in the heart of rock and roll, uh, um, through my mistakes, like I said, successes and all, there was still that conviction that said, I'm getting a little bit too close to the fire, I think, and I have to pull back. But thank God that I have His Spirit to remind me of that.
Yeah. To unpack for people what cutting your dreads represented to you, and was that the same time that you stepped away from P.O.D. for those 3 years or so?
It was right before.
Okay.
I wasn't. We had finished a record, and some other things had happened in our life. Then I was just like, it's time. I just need to step away. But I was going through some stuff during the process of a record we wrote called recorded When Angels and Serpents Dance, and you know, some personal things that happened, and I just wanted to just strip down of it all. I believed that I was going to die with my dreads, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
there was a part of me that said, you know, that's not my identity, you know, and now that I am a rock star, or whatever you want to call it, that's not why I started this. That's not why I was called to this. And so I just wanted to be stripped down of all of that stuff. And that was just more of a personal commitment to God, saying, Lord, if there's anything left or anything in me that's good and you can still use, then use it. And if everything you need to rip out of my life, then do that. And that was just a rededication to God, saying, I'm still in it. I still believe 100% who you are, and I want to follow you the best that I can. And at that point, my wife had 2 daughters. She was pregnant with my son, and I was just seeing the toll that rock and roll had on all of us as a band. And it was just my way of saying, God, that I didn't sign up for this, and I don't want this, And so I just want to make sure I'm in your hands. That's all.
Mm-hmm. It feels like it's going to sound really silly, but as 2 guys who've been walking with the Lord for a long time, you'll probably pick up on what I'm saying. It almost seems like you permanently fasted your dreads, because when I look at fasting and the purpose that God has used it in my life, it's like a reminder. Hey, every time you feel that hunger, you remember that I'm the one who supplies. And you looked in the mirror for years without dreadlocks. It's something that you had for decades, and that was a reminder of that dedication, man. That's all right. One more story, and then I want you to give a shout out to the Warriors and tell people who the heck they are. But you got to tell people with the Youth of the Nation album, and I'd love to hear why you think it's more relevant now than it was back in 9/11. But the song situation with Alive and Boom around 9/11. I thought that was so interesting and neat how God orchestrated all that.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's so much to unpack there, but it was, that was a heavy season for the world, and I believe that, that because of the kind of band that we were, because of the kind of message that we had of hope, most of the time in rock and roll, it's not received, but all of a sudden, here we are, 9/11. Our album Satellite was released on 9/11, and we're one of a handful of bands in the rock and roll industry that was recognized at the time because, obviously we know the story of 9/11 and what happened, but the world is instantly looking for answers and searching for hope and reason and questioning life and all these things. And here is P.O.D. with the #1 rock song on radio, a #1 MTV video that is saying, "I feel so alive for the very first time. I'm happy to be alive," and that alone speaks. It speaks alone. And so, because of that, all of a sudden, people started paying a little bit more attention to our band because they had banned most of rock and roll songs because of the content, because of the phrasing, the words. Even Boom was banned from radio for a short season because it was too relative to the crashing of the buildings.
Right. Jimmy Eat World had just released Bleed American, and they had to change the title of that album just to self-titled, I think. I mean, how crazy is that? Releasing an album called Bleed American right around 9/11.
Yeah. See, so perfect example. You can see the opposite effect it would have, whereas P.O.D. was saying, this is who we are. This is alive. And so they started to pay a little bit of attention. And, obviously years go by and people forget to ask those questions. People aren't looking for hope. You know what I mean? It's just rock and roll has gone back to what rock and roll is in the negative state. So that's why I believe that was such a season in a pocket for us to be visible. And so that song was huge. It still is to this day. It's become an anthem. Youth of the Nation was our second single. It's become an anthem everywhere we play around the world. And it was just, it was telling a story because we were writing the record 2 blocks away in our hometown of San Diego when there was a shooting at a school in Santee going on in real time. And so, again, you're reading about it in the book, but we were faced and forced to write a song about that, saying, man, it's so tough for our kids. What's going on with the world? And then, obviously it brings up depression and bullying and gun control and, all this stuff. Like I said, it's a lot to unpack, but here we are 22, 23 years later. And what's changed? Our kids, it's gotten worse for our kids. And now I'm older. I'm more experienced daddy now, and I say this all the time where I'm like, dude, my heart breaks for the kids of this generation. My heart broke for my kids, and now my kids are becoming adults and are adults. But it doesn't make it any easier to survive in this world. And so, yeah, it's easier to understand why, a kid is releasing so much frustration, or a kid is having, now we're learning so much about mental illness and all this stuff. And where are we in all this stuff? Where are we protecting our kids? But again, to me, obviously, I believe mental illness and all that stuff's a real thing, and I believe in all the resources to handle that. But I also, because I am a man of faith, I'm saying, man, don't forget to go to the main source. God understands. He knows. Like, you don't realize, how much love and knowing your purpose in life and your identity of life could just set you on the right path. And we get all of that from God. And that's just because I've seen it, I've lived it, I believe it, and I'm a man of faith. And, I want every kid to have peace of mind. And I know true peace comes from the Lord alone.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Yeah. All right, so am I right to say that the Warriors are kind of an unofficial fan club that helped put P.O.D. on the map?
Oh, 100%, man. It just, that was the old school.
I love
if
it,
you're
man.
old school, it's always been that. It kind of died down, the old, once we became the old guys, you know what I mean?
Right.
But there was
there was Total Request Live on MTV where they just basically called off the, occupied the phone lines to get you guys where y'all needed to be on that show. And that's awesome.
And that was another example of being undeniable, because back then, you couldn't fake it. You couldn't do it like today and say, "Oh, I got 1 million likes on this," and no, you didn't. You didn't. That's not a real, genuine 1 million likes. But back then, before cell phones, when people had to call in East Coast time, 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. to physically say, "I vote for P.O.D. this song," right? That was proof that we have believers out there. Not only believers, because people were coming along, but that's the power of being one heart, one mind, soul. We're so divided by our I'm this kind of Christian, I'm that kind, I'm this or that. We're so busy putting ourselves in categories instead of coming together and have unity and power and have a vote. And that's exactly what the Warriors did. It was the Warriors that were following P.O.D. for the first 7-8 years and said, "This is my band, I'm voting for them." And so that's what put us on the map in MTV's eyes, because I believe behind the scenes they were saying, "Who the heck is this band?"
Yeah, because back in the day, they weren't AI calls. Those were real human beings picking up their phone, and some of them had to do the little dial thing, and
exactly.
And if they messed up, they had to start all over.
And they had to take time out of their day. There's people that took their break so that they can go call, and that's the power of unity. If we're putting it in this context, it's the power of the unity of true believers. That say, "Hey, it's not really about my opinion. It's not about this idea or philosophy. It's about making sure that our God is seen."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. All right, well, Son of Southtown, you guys will, by the time you're listening to this, I'm pretty sure it will be available. And I want to say thank you very much, Sonny, for your time and sharing your story. I want to give you a second to let us know. We'll obviously have the show links in the show notes to P.O.D. and the whoever's. Is that still going on? Tell people just everything P.O.D. is doing, any tours coming up. And did I say that right? What you, Brian, and Lacey, what's that called?
It's the Whosoevers.
The Whosoevers, yes.
Yeah. It's just
I'm just over here botching things up, Sonny. Don't mind me.
No, it's okay, brother. It's okay. It's just a brotherhood and a sisterhood. And there was a time in my life, and I write about it in the book, where I just got tired of being around even Christians that just didn't understand, that just, you kind of need to, regardless, whether sometimes with Christianity, the only thing we have in common is the fact that Jesus died on the cross for us. And we believe that. But so a lot of times we don't have a lot of similarities, and that's okay. And at that point in my life, I needed to be around people that understood. And it was the head of Korn, my brother Ryan Reese and Lacey and guys from other circles that worked and lived in the real world and were just trying to love God in doing so. and we needed a place, where we can come together. And then that's branched off into telling our story and going into schools and the jail cells, and you know what I mean, rehabs and homeless shelters, and just wherever we can to reach kids. That's always going to be a part of our life. As far as P.O.D. goes, by the time you're watching this, we'll be getting ready to leave on tour to Europe with Godsmack and Drowning Pool, and we'll be busy the rest of the year. I have my Youth of the Nation Foundation that keeps me busy here in San Diego, and I'm just staying busy, bro. I'm trying to live out action and not just word, man.
Heck yeah. Dude, isn't it a neat thought that in 20 years, like, people are going to go to nursing homes and, like, the old people are going to be rocking to, like, P.O.D. and Snoop Dogg. And I mean, seriously, that's going to be cool, man, when us old people are rocking to some good stuff.
Yeah, probably because they heard it, like, in a commercial or something by that time, you know what I mean? Yeah. We're going to be the old guys where our music is, like, it's going to fit everywhere.
Sonny, thanks so much, man. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, man.
You've been watching Seacoast Church's Things You Won't Hear on Sunday podcast. You can now become a patron of this podcast and receive exclusive content. Your support goes towards Seacoast ministry efforts in local prisons. Also, be sure to leave us a review and subscribe to this podcast so that you get these episodes as soon as they're released. All of this information can be found in the show notes. Thanks for watching.